All right, hello and welcome to the Sports Addicts NFL show. We got a mostly not exciting, but a few exciting games to recap from Week 14, starting with the Monday night game. But before we get to that, I'm going to once again introduce my guest back home in the Capital Region, Zach Kirscher. How you doing?
Yeah, back in New York, I'm doing good. Also, you sold this really short because this is probably our most exciting podcast with the games we're about to talk about.
Well, yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk extensively about the couple of really good games from this weekend, and we're going to kind of blitz through the rest of the slate that was pretty blah on Sunday afternoon. But so yeah, we will get to our Wheel of Fortune recap on our preview podcast for next week when we do it for next week. But let's just say that Zach took the belt this week. It was a mistake for me to not respin with Nick Mullins, but yeah, that's okay. We'll get to that later. We don't need to
House
spend
always
much time on
wins.
that.
I try to tell you, the house always wins.
Right. So Zach's coming for the belt. But we are going to start with Monday night's game between the Ravens and the Browns. It ended 47-42 in favor of Baltimore. I think this was without question the game of the year. So we got a lot to talk about with this one. There was pretty much a whole week's worth of action that made up for everything on Sunday in the last 5 minutes alone of this game. We'll get to some further Lamar Jackson conversation. Let's say that's our number 2 topic. But but we're going to talk about the game first because there's a lot to talk about with this one. And I want to start with the Ravens. We really saw the return of the MVP version of Lamar Jackson that we saw last year. This was just like an overwhelming athletic performance from him. Probably the most impressive quarterback game with a mediocre passing stat line that I've ever seen. I mean, like he ended up with 172 yards, but I think, yeah, I mean, for sure, almost half of those came in like the last few minutes. So like coming up until then, it was not really an impressive stat line, but he was doing a lot and he was really carrying them on his back. So I don't know, just give me some thoughts on Lamar's performance before we get to the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, prior to him coming back out of the locker room, so like prior to the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, he was below 100 yards passing, and then finished with 72, I think you said. So obviously he threw the ball really well down the stretch when he needed to, and that throw to Marquise Brown to go ahead was one of the biggest throws he's made in a long time, and he's throwing
that. It was a gutsy play too.
Oh yeah, like I thought he was running. He could have run. Like J.K. Dobbins was blocking ahead of him. He had space. Like that would have been an easy first down. But he went for it, and throwing it to a guy that had 3 drops in that game was not good. So a lot of trust there. But yeah, Lamar was awesome again, and it's about him running, right? Like he ran for 124 yards. It was only 9 carries. Honestly, I would have rather had that number be like 12. But 124 yards on the ground was awesome. They ran the ball really well as a team. And Lamar just didn't make mistakes, which I think has been the problem the last few weeks. Like we've kind of counted – I don't think you or I has counted out the Ravens, but we've definitely been like down on them in the fact that they haven't been able to win these games I feel like they're supposed to win and that they've controlled for the most part. So he didn't make any mistakes, which I think was the difference in the game because Baker did make 1 mistake. And honestly, that's kind of what it came down to at the end. So really impressive by both teams, honestly. This was a game I was begging for the clock to just break and like play forever because the fact that it just went back and forth was awesome. And it really had a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, including like the backdoor cover on a safety at the end. I mean, right, like really everything you could possibly ask for from this game we got. But yeah, I mean, I think just on Lamar's performance, I think that there are still some problems with the Ravens passing game and the way it's designed. Like it still looks difficult every time they drop back to pass the ball. And I think that's been an issue for a lot of Greg Roman offenses. Like there was a point, I think it was towards the end of the first half where Lamar had been sacked more times than he'd actually thrown a pass. So there's definitely still some problems offensively for Baltimore, but like when you can run the ball like this, it really makes everything else pretty much irrelevant. I mean, if you can put up 47 points while only throwing for 163 yards, you're definitely doing something right on the ground. And you could see that. I mean, you could do a whole podcast on like any individual one of these drives towards the end of the game. But I mean, when the Ravens were just running the ball down Cleveland's throat with Dobbins and with Gus Edwards, they didn't end up with a ton of yards overall at the end of the game. But if you just watched those drives and watched how they were just carrying multiple Browns defenders on their backs for 7-8 yards, not breaking off these huge runs, but getting these good sized chunks on every single play, you can see the recipe for the Ravens offense that we've been wanting to see for the last few weeks.
Right. And they didn't use Mark Ingram at all. He did not have a single carry in this game. And I love Mark Ingram. I think he's an awesome football player, but like he's past his prime, obviously, and he's now just like a bruiser where if it's 3rd and goal at the 1, like sure, put him in, let him run. But for what they want to do offensively with this read option and spread you out and get the ball into athletic playmakers' hands, Mark doesn't fit as well right now. So I love that they went to J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Like you said, they didn't run for something crazy. I mean, Edwards still averaged 7 yards a carry. But having Lamar in the backfield, in the shotgun with another person like J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards, I don't care what your defense does. If you ran the ball 3 times, I'm like probably 9 times out of 10, you're getting a first down. That's just how they are. It's very hard to stop that run because Lamar is, first of all, brilliant at the read option and reads it perfectly almost every time. And if he doesn't, sure, he messed up one time. As long as he doesn't fumble it or they don't turn it over, he's probably not going to mess up the next time. So just keep running it. And you saw, like, there were times it was 3rd and 6 or something, and they're running the ball. And that's awesome because that's what they are. They're a running football team. They ran 32 times, passed it 21, and the majority of those 21 passes came on a 2-minute drive at the 4th quarter when they needed to throw. And he did well when that needed to happen. Mark Andrews, I'm sure we're going to talk about this with the Browns, but Mark Andrews caught a couple passes, broke a few tackles, and got extra yards and made it easier for them. So Lamar did exactly what he had to do with getting the ball into his playmakers' hands or keeping it himself and making a play, and it worked perfectly. They put up 47.
Right. I think you said it right there that Lamar basically did everything he needed to do, and he didn't try to do too much and didn't try to throw too much over the top, which I think has been a lot of their struggles, and they really went back to the basics with the read option. And I think in some ways you could like criticize the Ravens for their reliance on these like broken plays. And that's kind of a thing that their offense has been criticized for in the past. But I think that overlooks the extent to which Lamar Jackson just breaks plays. I mean, like you can blame the Browns defense all you want, or you can do whatever. But like the simple fact of it is that Lamar's the most athletic guy on the field, and he's going to make guys miss once he gets to the second level. And it's not hard for him to get to the second level. So I think that there's just so much potential with this Ravens offense. I think we saw a lot of it in this game, putting up 47 with only 21 pass attempts. I think that's just a really impressive performance all around.
Yeah, I mean, offensively, I saw everything I wanted to see from the Ravens. Defensively, it was a little bit concerning, I will say that. I know they've had a lot of injuries in the secondary, but I know, like, I'm a Browns. I think the Browns are good. I've been on the Browns bandwagon this whole year, but, like, I don't think they should have scored 42 in that game, and I don't think Baker should have done, which we're going to talk about, but I don't think he should have looked as good as he looked. So concerning for the Ravens being that they have so much talent on that defense, so much money in that defense, and if you're going to win a Super Bowl, you can't be asking Lamar to go score 47 a game because when he's playing someone like Patrick Mahomes, if you're giving up 42 to the Browns, you're probably giving up 100 to Patrick Mahomes. So you got it, like the defense has to get better.
No, yeah, and I mean Calais Campbell has really looked like a shell of himself in the last few weeks. I think they have problems besides the players who are out injured. So yeah, I mean, there's still some concerns with the Ravens for sure, but this win I think is the win that's going to clinch a playoff spot for them. The rest of their schedule is very easy, and I think they're going to be a scary team to face. And I think that none of the division winners want any part of the Ravens in the first round in their buildings. So I want to talk about the Browns a little bit too, though, because it was a really impressive game from them in a lot of ways too. A huge and gutsy game for Baker Mayfield. He spread the ball around, hit a lot of different targets. He's making huge, important plays, and he really showed what the Browns expected out of him when they took him with that first pick. So, yeah, just your comments on how Baker played in this one.
I thought Baker was fantastic. I thought Baker was everything that the Browns thought they drafted when they did. He's struggled a lot at times, and I think he's also had a lot of good games that probably get brushed away just because people are focusing on the struggles. But this one was – he couldn't have played any better. Like, I understand he threw an interception. He made a mistake. It was not a great throw. It was also a fantastic defensive play. those happen. Like, it's bad luck. You got to take them sometimes. But he responded to that in a fantastic way. Got down 34-20 and just let a massive charge come back. Made throw after throw. They incorporated the run game. Like, I thought Stefanski had an awesome game as a play caller. I have zero complaints about the Browns offense. I thought they were awesome. And Baker threw for 343. Wasn't super accurate. Like, his completion percentage was not great, but the Ravens are a good defense. I know they still gave up 42, but like, their corners are awesome when you talk about people like Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. So like, you're throwing into tragedy almost all the time, and he did great with it. And Jarvis, I know he had 6 for 52, but like, he didn't feel like a huge part of that game plan, which I think is even more impressive that Baker did that well, because like, Jarvis is like an Odell where they're the safety blanket. Like, okay, shit hit the fan, where are we going with the ball? And it's Jarvis. So the fact that he was able to do what he did without, like, the running backs only ran for 138. I know I say only, that's like not a ton for the Browns. That's a lot for a lot of teams, but Baker ran for 23 of those himself. So they didn't have a great run game, but Baker was awesome. And like, if you're a Browns fan, I know you lost, and I know you can't win the division now, but like, you saw everything you wanted to from that offense, and I would be thrilled to go into the postseason with that offense right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just been so impressed with the versatility of the Browns offense over the last couple of weeks. I mean, you can obviously see what they do on the ground, and that's been their main selling point in most of the past games. And Nick Chubb had a pretty good game. I mean, he scored the touchdown that we thought might win them the game towards the end there. Yeah, he had 2 touchdowns on the ground. Kareem Hunt had a rushing touchdown. Baker had a rushing touchdown. Kareem Hunt also had a receiving touchdown. So there's a lot of stuff that this offense can do, and I think a lot of that is credit to Kevin Stefanski. I mean, he is certainly the best coach that the Browns have had since Belichick. I think, like, there's really no arguing that at this point. And you saw the handshake at the end of the game, the respect that John Harbaugh and Kevin Stefanski have for each other after a game like that. And I just don't think there's been respect like that towards the Browns coaching staff in a very long time. And I think that that's a huge step forward for the Browns. And I think that, this is a tough loss for them. There's no moral victories in the NFL. A loss is a loss. But that being said, I think even in losing this game, I think they showed how much of a threat they can be in the playoffs to basically any team besides maybe the Chiefs.
Yeah. I mean, again, you scored 40 on a good defense. Your quarterback was balling. You have a great play caller. You have a good coach. You have great talent. I mean, even the defense played like absolute garbage, but the talent is all over the place. And I know you can only, like, talent can only take you so far. You still need scheme. You still need those players to make plays. I get that. But the fact that you have that talent is a step above teams that don't have that talent. So, yes, Myles Garrett didn't have a great game. He wasn't as disruptive as normal. You still have Myles Garrett. Like, he's going to get loose in some games. He's going to play well. Olivier Vernon had 2 sacks. He hasn't been getting to the quarterback much. He got to the quarterback a lot this game. So the defense was bad. Like, there's no sugarcoating that. They didn't make tackles. They honestly made it ridiculously easy for Justin Tucker to kick that, because they didn't tackle Mark Andrews one single time on that last drive. But you have talent. I think the defense will be fine. I know they're very injured. I worry about the secondary mostly. I think Andrew Sendejo is like the worst safety on planet Earth. So the fact that he's like one of your highest paid and most important players on the back end is a little bit scary. But if you can get Denzel Ward back and you can disrupt the passer with Garrett and Olivier Vernon, you have decent linebackers, you're good enough to make some teams struggle a little bit, and your offense is great. So it's concerning, but it's not terrifying, at least.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think the defense definitely got run on a lot in this game, but I actually think the problem was not the defensive front. I mean, I think they have a lot of strength there. If you saw it towards the end of the game when the running backs were getting the carries, not so much Lamar, but like, it seems like the problem to me is more in the back 7 than in the front 4. And I think you saw that when these backs and Lamar got to the second level and were just making guys miss pretty easily. And I think an underrated part of the season for the Browns that they lost Grant Delpit before the season even started. I think he would have potentially been a huge help in a game like this. And as you said, they're also missing Denzel Ward. So they have some issues on the back end of the defense there. But yeah, I mean, in a game with 89 total points, there's going to be concerns for both defenses, and I think that both of them are ultimately fine. I'm not that worried about either of them. But yeah, you mentioned Justin Tucker. We got to give a shout out to the GOAT before we wrap up this recap. I mean, he was a little cold all game just because he hadn't had to kick a field goal. The Ravens were just scoring touchdowns every drive. And then he comes in for his first field goal attempt and knocks down a 55-yard game winner right down the middle. Exactly what you expect out of Justin Tucker. So
after
definitely shout out to him.
Somehow missing one last week where it felt like the world was ending. Like I kind of felt like I had to tilt sideways because I think the world tipped on its axis. But then he responded in a cold weather, windy game where the other kicker was awful for all intents and purposes. Parkey was not very good. And then Justin Tucker just hammers a 55-yarder. But before we get to the next part, I just want to say, like, we've talked about how the defenses were bad. I think it's much more that the offenses were really good. Like,
I think so too, yeah.
It's more about Lamar and Baker just flat out balling. So that's why it's also less concerning for the defenses.
All right, so now we're going to get to the most important part of this recap, which is something that was big on the internet, and we didn't really mention it in the recap, but basically just to summarize, there was a point when the Ravens offense was off the field. I'm not sure exactly at what point in the game it was, but it was in the fourth quarter. And Lamar jogs off the sideline into the locker room for unexplained reasons at the time. Lisa Salter said she'd get back to us on it, and that's what we got. So eventually he came out. He was still in the locker room for something like a half an hour. Trace McSorley was in there running a drive and a half and not looking extremely great doing it. So it looked like there were problems for the Ravens here. And the Ravens Twitter account tweeted that Lamar was in the locker room suffering from cramps, quote unquote, and that he was questionable to return. But as soon as Trace McSorley got injured on a big third down, Lamar Jackson came running out of the locker room. Here comes Lamar. Some Willis Reed echoes there. But the question is, what was Lamar doing in the locker room? So let's just have your thoughts on it first.
All right. Well, you'll find out, but we have polar opposite beliefs in this one. I'm wholeheartedly of the belief he was getting an IV, comes out of the locker room. He has his left arm, like just below the elbow, taped. Very common IV site. He's a right-handed person, so you do it on the left. It was taped, which is what happens after an IV. It was a little bit longer than I expected for IV purposes, so that's a little questionable. But I told you this, Lamar is the most authentic person in the NFL. Like, he will straight up tell you everything he's thinking. He has been telling us everything he's been thinking with, like, the defense. Oh, I think the defenses know our plays because they're calling it out beforehand. Like, I've never heard a quarterback say that at the podium before. So I think if he did have issues, he would have said that. And he very clearly said, I did not pull a Paul Pierce, which I think is also important because he knew exactly what people were referring to by saying, like, Lamar, you were kind of in there a long time. Like, what was going on? And he was like, no, I didn't pull Paul Pierce. I didn't pull Paul Pierce. Also, shout out to him for taking shots at Paul Pierce, who's like one of my least favorite athletes of all time. So I love that. But yeah, I feel like he would have been honest and open with us. And he said he had to get an IV. He might have gotten two of them, honestly. That might have been the reason it took so long.
Well, yeah. So my view on this story, as Zach has said, is that he was definitely in the locker room taking a dump. And there's no shame in that. You know, I love Lamar Jackson. I mean, everybody does it. It's like sometimes it happens. Everybody's issues in the intestinal area are different. You never know how long somebody will spend in the bathroom. But yeah, I mean, you saw him running to the locker room, did not look like a man with cramps. He was getting down the hallway pretty quickly. And when the door opened to the locker room, he quickly rushed some poor Raven staffer out of the way so he could get to the locker room even faster. I mean, maybe he was just in a hurry because the game was close. Well, I don't know. That looked like a man who had to take a dump to me. So one other thing I will note is he had that wrap on his left arm earlier in the game as well. Okay. So that's not necessarily proving anything. And also, I will not take any quotes from Lamar or the Ravens personnel as any evidence of anything, because the Celtics and Paul Pierce covered up his own story for at least a solid decade before Paul Pierce finally admitted on television last year that yes, he had left the game because he had to poop. So I'm just saying, I don't think we know the whole truth about the story.
He left the game because he poops his pants on the court. That's an issue. That's a whole different issue than just having to go to the bathroom. But the best part of this whole entire thing is please go to Marlon Humphrey's Twitter And the night of the game, he tweeted out, "Did Lamar wash his hands after his Paul Pierce stunt last night?" And that puts the exclamation point on the whole thing for me. But I still wholeheartedly believe, like, Lamar, if any player in the NFL did this, they would all hide it. I think Lamar is like the one person that would flat out be like, "Yeah, I had a really bad stomachache. I had to go."
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Anything is possible, but this is the one conspiracy theory out of the many in our country that I am fully on board with at this point. But yeah, so that aside, I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
Can we say he did both? What if he had to go to the bathroom and got an IV? Like, what if he did both things? I feel like that's more likely. Like, he had to go bathroom quick and then got an IV right after.
Yeah, I mean, I could buy that. I mean, like, I'm just saying cramps doesn't necessarily discount that. You could have cramps anywhere. You could have stomach cramps that will lead you to have to go to the bathroom. So I'm not saying the cramp story is false. I'm just saying it's not the whole truth. And so could I prove this in a court of law? Probably not. But I'm just going to say that there is some interesting evidence.
We'll settle in the middle ground. He went to the bathroom and got an IV. We're good. That's perfect.
All right. So glad we settled on that. I want to get to the Sunday night game now, which was, I think, the other most interesting matchup of the week. It was the Bills against the Steelers in Buffalo. The Bills come away with a 26-15 win. It was a pretty ugly game, I thought. Like, not the great contest that we were expecting, even though they got made up for on Monday night. It really turned on Ben Roethlisberger's pick six at the end of the first half. And the Steelers offense just continued to look toothless. And I think their defense is looking a little bit weakened as well. I don't blame the players that are out there right now. I think they're just feeling the effect of a lot of the injuries they've had. And the Steelers' rushing issues continued just as bad as they were before, even with James Conner back. They had 17 carries for 47 total rushing yards in this game. So do you think there's something that the Steelers can do schematically or offense-wise to get themselves back on track, or is this just what it is?
Acquire a better quarterback.
Yeah.
You could do that. But I'll probably talk about this again with the Bills, but the thing for me, like, the offensive line for the Steelers, it almost looked like they were pass blocking when they were running. And, like, I know they're running out of the shotgun. I know Ben doesn't want to be remotely close to the line of scrimmage, doesn't want to move very much. And it's like the whole thing is just messed up. Like, there's no timing to the runs. The blocking is pathetic. Nobody even has to blitz to stop the run. Like, James Conner, it's not even I feel like it's not the running back at all. It's the fact that there's nowhere for them to run. Like, I feel like I'm watching the Giants from last year. The running back can't go anywhere. There's nothing you can do. And then their version of the run game is like those quick, like, wide receiver screens at Deontay Johnson, and, like, let's get the ball in Chase Claypool's hands as quickly as possible and let him do something. The issue with that is Deontay Johnson drops the ball more than he catches it, and Claypool hasn't necessarily been featured much. So they have to get the ball into their playmakers' hands as much as possible, and it's just not really happening for them right now. And I don't know if it's going to happen at any point in the near future. And I just read a quote today about Ben talking about how he would never quit in the middle of a season. And that's, like, a little bit concerning, the fact that we even have to have a conversation about the quarterback not playing the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly think they'd be better off with Mason Rudolph in there.
No.
I mean, I think we kind of saw the evidence for that last year. So I think this is really their best bet, and it's what they got to go with. And obviously they've had success with it. I mean, we shouldn't forget that this team is still 11-2. Like, they've been able to rack up wins even though their offense has been struggling. So I think that's a point in their favor in a lot of ways, scheme-wise. But yeah, I mean, I think what you said about the offensive line is a good point, and how they're running out of the shotgun so much. And I think that is kind of making things a little bit more predictable. I mean, you saw Roethlisberger, he had 37 pass attempts today. It didn't quite get up to his usual 50, but yeah, I mean, I just think there's a lot of problems with the Steelers team. They're dropping a lot of passes, especially Deontay Johnson, who's had, like, kind of a nightmare of a season with the drops. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of issues here for Pittsburgh, but I want to talk about the Bills too, because they look like a team on the rise. MVP Josh Allen didn't arrive until the second half, and really only stuck around for the third quarter, but that turned out to be enough for the Bills. And it's good to see flashes of MVP Josh whenever we see him. And the Stephon Diggs trade is just looking like an absolute win-win, one of the ultimate win-win trades of all time. I mean, you see Diggs looking like one of the best receivers in the league with Buffalo. He's exactly what this offense needed. And then Justin Jefferson looks like a huge offensive rookie of the year candidate in Minnesota at the same position. So that's really a win-win there. I'm still really high on the Bills. I think they move the ball downfield better than anyone in the AFC except for the Chiefs. But I know Zach is a little bit less high on the Bills. So I want to hear your glass half empty view of the Bills.
All right. I'll start with the good stuff. So I'll start with how I filled my glass half full. Brian Daboll was outstanding at whatever adjustments they made at halftime to attack that zone blitz and to just get Diggs in a hole and just feed the ball to Stephon Diggs. Please do it more. For my whole life with the Giants, I've argued that Odell should have got the ball every single damn play that they threw it. Like, if you have a receiver like that, you just target him. I feel like you probably feel the same way with like a CD Lamb. I mean, you have 3 good receivers, but still, don't throw it to like Blake Jarwin. Like, let's throw it to the legit receivers, and that's nothing against the tight end, but still. So I love that they got him involved. I love that Josh feels very comfortable throwing the ball to Steph and Cole Beasley whenever stuff gets a little questionable. But Brian Daboll had an incredible adjustment at halftime and to single-handedly win that game in the third quarter. My other good part, I think, for the Bills, the last 2 weeks they've played the 49ers and the Steelers, who were both pretty legit at getting after the quarterback. Their offensive line dominated both those games. Not just played well, they dominated the defensive line for the Steelers and the 49ers. TJ Watt was ready to quit at halftime, it looked like. He was exhausted. He was getting doubled. He was on the ground more than he was standing up. It was like the Bills' offensive line gets an MVP award for the last 2 weeks. My glass being only half full is that it was 7-0 like deep into the second quarter, and if Ben doesn't throw that pick, it's probably 7-0 at halftime. And I don't know that the Bills, like, sure, they could have still made those adjustments, but it's just a whole different vibe. The momentum is completely in the other locker room all of a sudden. And the Bills defense quickly found out that they could do whatever they wanted against the Steelers offense because they weren't playing at all. So you end up with 26, had a great third quarter. I get it. But I think there were a lot of bad things that got covered up by the great adjustment by Brian Daboll at halftime to get that offense rolling in the third quarter. Again, Josh did what he had to do. He made the proper throws in the third quarter, led them to the victory. I get it. But for me, that's way more about the offensive line and the offensive adjustments. I'm not saying he played bad. I'm just saying, like, that game plan was fantastic in the third quarter, and that single-handedly won the game. So, against it, you and I both, like, we were talking about this with the Monday night game, but like, we feel like the Steelers might be the third best team in their own division, let alone the AFC. So you're playing a team that is not as good as they might appear, and you're struggling for your life to try to get the lead going into halftime and looking kind of bad doing so. And then you only play really 15 minutes of this game is what won it for them. So you take that. All we're doing with these teams are trying to figure out how they can beat the Chiefs, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But, like, that's how I'm looking at all these teams. Like, okay, they played an awesome third quarter. They beat a decent team. Like, does that apply to being the Chiefs? Well, probably not, because they played 15 minutes of a football game.
Right, and that's going to be the bar for any AFC team, and it's obviously an extremely high bar to reach. But I think the Bills are probably closer to it than any other AFC team right now in my mind. I mean, like you said, Brian Daboll and the adjustments he's made and just the way he's made Josh Allen tick this year, I think sets him up as a real head coaching candidate. And I think a lot of teams made fun of the Bills when they hired him. I mean, just like coming out of the college game. I mean, I think he's been absolutely great for them. And I think you can't really criticize anything he's done. But I want to get to another game that we're going to recap real quick. And that's the Eagles' surprising win over the Saints. The final score was 24-21. Jalen Hurts was pretty good through the air and very good on the ground, and that was enough to beat the Saints, who did not really look like themselves in this game. I mean, the Saints hadn't allowed any individual to rush for 100 yards this year, and both Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders rushed for over 100 in this game for the Eagles. Wasn't like a dominant offensive performance by the Eagles, but that's tough to expect facing the Saints defense, and they finally looked like they had a actual plan on offense, which they have definitely lacked with Wentz in the lineup in the last few weeks, and that in itself is a huge step forward, and the Eagles are not out of the race yet, at least mathematically, and they just won the toughest game left on their schedule. So, yeah, thoughts on how Jalen Hurts looked in this game?
Yeah, so I have a friend that's a diehard Eagles fan, and he asked the question that why does it seem like Doug Peterson can only scheme when it's anyone but Carson Wentz at quarterback? And I think that's a legit question. Like, this game plan was fantastic for Jalen Hurts. I mean, Jalen ran the ball mostly, didn't have to make too many tough throws. Like, the game was very simplified for him. Not taking anything away from him, he was fantastic for sure. Running for over 100 yards was awesome. He played better than I expected him to play. But I think Doug Peterson did really well to get this team in a position to win this game. This is a week after we just put him on the hot seat and said he probably wasn't going to be there next year. But I still
think that's probably true.
Yeah.
But
I think he did well, and Jalen played well. I think the story, though, is their defense has been underrated all year. It's been underrated for years. Their defensive line is awesome. Fletcher Cox is just a monster. And every year it seems like their secondary is supposed to be bad, and they play a whole lot better than they actually should. So for me, their defense was great, put them in a position to win, and Jalen Hurts running the ball with finally getting Miles Sanders involved. And I think so the part of it that impressed me was that with Jalen Hurts, they went like almost Ravens style, like strictly let's go to this read option. Like either Jalen's keeping it or Miles Sanders is getting it, and both of them got super loose. And the Saints didn't really know how to stop that. And I guess they don't defend it much because in their division, they're full of just drop back quarterbacks. So I was impressed.
Yeah, I mean, I just really like how the Eagles looked in general in this game, like you said, on both sides of the ball. And I think the real difference is that Hurts just looked comfortable, and Wentz has looked extremely uncomfortable in all of his most recent games. And I don't know if that's necessarily a scheme thing or something that's going on with Wentz, like whether he's just breaking the scheme they have for him, but it really just looked directionless for the Eagles, and they finally look like they have a direction here. So I think that's a positive sign for them. They are almost definitely still out of the playoffs here. I mean, they would need to win out and get some help, which is not out of the question. I mean, they got a couple division games coming up, so there's a chance to make up ground. But I want to talk about the Saints just a little bit. Do you think this game has any worries for them, or do you think it'll all be fine when Breeze comes back?
Yeah, I think it reaffirmed what you and I have been saying. Just you got to rely on Breeze. Taysom Hill's not the answer. We'll talk about this in the next pod, but like the Chiefs are coming up, and that's a Jameis game. If you ask me, you're not beating the Chiefs with Taysom Hill as your quarterback.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So we'll get to that in a little bit, but I wouldn't worry for the Saints. I don't think. I mean, you're playing something you've never seen on film before. You had no idea what was coming. Is Hurts going to be running like run-pass options? Is he just going to strictly be running a read option? Is he going to be a drop-back quarterback? Like you had no idea what you're preparing for there. So I'm not worried about that. I'm also wait and see more so on the Eagles. Like, yeah, that was a really good game, good win. Nobody thought you were going to do it. But let's see now that people know what you're trying to do. Let's see how that works out.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I just want to mention that the Saints with that loss have dropped out of the 1 seed in the NFC. The Packers grabbed that now. That's, I think, huge for any team because the 1 seed is the only one that gets a first round bye this year. But I think it's especially huge for the Saints because it could require Drew Brees to play a huge playoff game at Lambeau Field, and I think that's not really what they want. So, the Saints will be looking for the Packers to pick up a loss in these next few weeks.
11 cracked ribs doesn't feel good. It feels much worse when you're getting hit into a frozen tundra of Lambeau Field.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely some danger there for the Saints if that's what ends up happening. But I want to talk about this team that we've been referencing in almost every other preview, which is the Chiefs, who are kind of the elephant in the room for every AFC team. They beat the Dolphins 33-27. It was actually a really good game by the end. Mahomes threw 3 picks, and it still felt like a pretty routine win for the Chiefs. So that pretty much sums up where the Chiefs are at. I don't think we need to talk too much about Mahomes. We've talked enough about him. I think one area of concern for the Chiefs that I kind of saw in this game is that the rushing attack went pretty much nowhere. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was just not able to move the line at all. So do you think that's any kind of a concern for them, their run game, or were they just running into an opponent in the Dolphins that just has too much on the front line for a guy as small as Clyde?
I don't know if it's either. I'm not really I don't think Miami is a great run defense by any means, but also I'm not too worried about the Chiefs just because I think if they needed to run, they could turn it on. I mean, they played Buffalo this year and ran for 250. They run for 50 yards and Mahomes throws for 450. I'm fine with it. They don't worry me. I think it's impressive that they looked so bad, honestly, in the first half and still kind of won that one relatively easily, if you could say that. But I think that we should talk more about the Dolphins in this game than anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought they were really impressive. I think Tua is really cooking. Let Tua cook. Hashtag there.
Please, God, let him cook.
Right, yeah. And the defense is frisky. There's a lot of really good players there. I think they're extremely well coached. I think they showed a lot of fight coming back in that fourth quarter because that game looked out of reach. And by the end, it was like a one-score game. I think they made a really good decision to kick that field goal there and go for the onside kick. I think that's always the right call, but most coaches don't do it. And
shout out Anthony Lynn.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I was impressed with Brian Flores there. Just really impressed with the Dolphins overall. I know I said before there are no moral victories in the NFL, and that is true because it shows up for a loss here for the Dolphins, and they're right in the thick of a playoff race. But I think it'll really be a shame if they don't make the playoffs because I would really like to see them face maybe, I don't know, Pittsburgh in round one. I think that would be a really interesting game. So, yeah, thoughts on the Dolphins?
Yeah, next year is the year for Miami. Like, if you're a Dolphins fan, you got to be chomping at the bit to get the next season. You got your quarterback. I said this, I'm a huge Tua fan, but, like, I've said this so many times on the podcast. Like, he can throw for 100 yards and not turn the ball over and just be a game manager, or he can throw for 400 and get you touchdowns and try to go win a game. Against the Chiefs, it took them a little bit to figure that out. They got to the second half and be like, okay, we're getting smoked now. Like, let's go try to get some points. And they let Tua go, and he played great. You gotta, like, he's like Russ. You just gotta trust him. He's gonna make some crazy things happen. Sometimes it's gonna look really bad, but he's gonna find a way. I promise you. The defense is awesome. Their championship window is opening. Unfortunately for every team in the AFC, the championship window gets closed just a little bit because there's a guy named Patrick Mahomes that has a 10-year contract to play in Kansas City. So that's the downside of it, but he's not going to win.
He also owns like half the Royals now, so he's not going anywhere.
He's not going to win 10 straight championships. I feel pretty strongly about that. So someone's going to sneak some out every now and again. And Miami's in a really good position to do so. They're young defensively. They didn't have their two starting linebackers in this game, and their defense still looked pretty solid. Good young defensive line, great corners, like fantastic corners. I mean, the interception by Howard was unbelievable. And Byron Jones is playing great as well. Safeties are decent. So, like, I wish they still had Minkah Fitzpatrick, but overall the defense is solid, and you have a great quarterback coming. You got to get a lot better around him, though. The line is shaky. The receivers are really not great, nothing to write home about. And the running backs, I mean, you're running out a bunch of undrafted guys, which that's one thing, but they're also little and they're all the same type of running back, and they're not really, like, going to get you you're not going to rely on them, I don't think, on a championship caliber team. So Myles Gaskin, I'm a big fan of. I think he's a good third down option, but you gotta find a better option, I think, to help out Tua, and the receivers have to get a lot better.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think the focus in this offseason for the Dolphins, whether they make the playoffs or not, is going to be to add more weapons for Tua, because I think the defense looks pretty built up to where Brian Flores wants it to be. And, like you said in this game, I mean, obviously Myles Gaskin didn't play. He was hurt. I forget the guy's first name, but Ahmad, the running back they've been running, who'd been pretty good in the last few weeks, he was also out in this one. They got nothing out of Devontae Parker. So, I mean, I think it was a really impressive offensive performance considering all those things. And, I mean, I think the Dolphins have a really bright future, even if they were to miss out on the playoffs this year, which is looking increasingly likely with the Colts continuing to win games and the Ravens winning as well.
Yeah, like you said, go get to a legit number one option wide receiver. You already have a good tight end in Mike Gesicki, and then build that lineup, and your team starts to look a whole lot better because the defense is very solid, and you have a defensive-minded coach who obviously does a brilliant job with his roster. So I would be really excited to be a Dolphins fan. I mean, I think the future is very bright. Yeah,
no, for sure, and I think they're definitely heading in the right direction. But with that talk on the Chiefs, I think that's a good transition into a new segment that I want to debut here called In Your Wildest Dreams. So with the Chiefs on a path to lock up the 1 seed in the AFC in the near future, they're just looking casually dominant every single week. I think the question has to be raised. If the Chiefs have the 1 seed and they're at Arrowhead for the whole playoffs, can literally anyone beat them and stop them from getting to the Super Bowl? So for the next few weeks, what we're going to do in this segment is we're going to take a different AFC contender each week. We're going to try to imagine the scenario wherein that team wins a game at Arrowhead in January. So just as a disclaimer, before we get started, we do not believe that any team is actually likely to do this. So keep that in mind when we're giving the argument for how, the Colts could win at Arrowhead or whatever. We don't think that they will do that, but we're constructing the scenario where that could happen as a thought experiment. So this week, the team we're going to talk about is a team that we have already talked about on this podcast, and that's the Bills. So they're the team that I personally think would have the best chance in the game at Arrowhead, which, to be clear, is still not a good chance, but I think the best chance out of any of the AFC teams. So I want to talk about what it would take for the Bills to win a game at Arrowhead Stadium, and what does that game kind of look like?
All right, so first, this is funny, but I just want to say that I saw this morning on Get Up, they did a championship odds thing, and the top 6 most likely scenarios are the Chiefs versus, and then you fill in the blank with any NFC team you want. So literally the 6 most likely scenarios for the Super Bowl are the Chiefs playing any NFC team that makes the playoffs. So for these purposes, I don't even think you need to include the Arrowhead thing. Like, I think find a parking lot and still, it doesn't.
Sure, yeah.
But so there's 2 schools of thought that I'm kind of between. One, the defense needs to be just flat out dominant. Like, they need to have a sort of like how the Dolphins played, where they just turn over Patrick Mahomes a lot. Like, the dude's thrown 1 interception leading up to the Dolphins game, and he still theoretically won that game by 2 possessions, even though it was really just a 6-point game. But the late field goal kind of did that. So I don't know that you're going to force him into turnovers, because even if he does start the turnover, they're going to just do different things with Tyreek Hill in the backfield. They're going to just run easy stuff for Travis Kelce. I mean, for all intents and purposes, you can't really defend them because they got a lot of unguardable guys. You got a quarterback that can make every single throw in the world, probably with both hands, and he's going to fool you while he does it. You got a receiver that literally cannot be covered in man coverage, and you got a Travis Kelce who's just a legit top 5 receiver if you want to even consider him a receiver. So that kind of pushes the defensive side out of it for me. So the offensive side for the Bills, you got to get a game out of Devin Singletary. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's got to run. You got to get first downs. You got to eat up clock. And then you can't turn the ball over. Josh has to play a perfect game, a 20 for 25 for 220. And then Singletary needs 15 carry or 20 carries for 100 yards is what you'd look at. And the issue with that is the Chiefs defense kind of came up bigger than usual in the postseason last year. And you got guys like Tyrann Mathieu, who, I mean, he's always around the ball. I got a better feeling than not that he would get the ball out in a scenario that he needed one. So I'm going to say there's a lot when we do these things, but you got to run the ball. You got to milk clock. We've talked about this. I said, if you show me a team that can take time of possession and dominate it can't just be a 1 minute win in time of possession. It has to be we have the ball for 15 more minutes than Patrick Mahomes. Then you got a chance, and that's all you're looking for in these. You just want a chance,
right? Yeah, and that's what we've been talking about with teams trying to beat the Chiefs all year. Is you have to just not let Patrick Mahomes have the ball as much as you possibly can, and that's why I think Buffalo has a little bit of an issue. Their run game hasn't necessarily been very strong this year, but like you said, if they can get a good game out of Devin Singletary or out of Zach Moss or out of their run game in general, if they let Josh Allen loose to scramble a little bit, which they've been very protective of him in that regard so far. Exactly. But I think he has really Cam Newton-esque running potential just as a big quarterback who can really rumble down the field and pick up first downs. So, yeah, I think they would have to do some of that. I would trust Brian Daboll to be able to come up with a game plan that at least has a shot at beating Kansas City. But, yeah, I mean, I think what that would require is for MVP Josh Allen to show up and to play the whole game as MVP Josh Allen. And I think that what would give the Bills a chance is that they're capable of putting together all different kinds of scoring drives. I mean, we've seen them put together these, 14 play 85-yard drives where they just march down the field, but they're also capable of picking up big chunk plays and getting 4 play 85-yard touchdown drives. So I think that since they have the potential to do both of those things and they have a defense that has been good at forcing turnovers, I think that they have some of the recipe for what is needed to beat the Chiefs. But I think the biggest concern for me with them would be their run game or lack thereof, because they didn't do that much of that against the Steelers. So I think that would be the concern. But yeah, I think that's the recipes. You need really good Josh Allen to show up. You need to hold on to the ball. And like you said, you need to force some turnovers.
Yeah, and I think so the Stephon Diggs part is really important too for them, because like if you can't run the ball, you're going to be in probably 3rd and long. And you have Cole Beasley, who is always open on 3rd downs, but I would anticipate Tyrann Mathieu would play man coverage against Cole in those situations just to try to completely take him away, which means Steph has to win against double coverage most likely. And you just have to find a way to get him the ball. So these are all tough recipes. Like, no, I don't think the Chiefs are unbeatable, but they are the clear-cut best team in the AFC. And you just have to dominate the ball. Like, you just cannot let Patrick Mahomes get in the rhythm, because if he does, the game's over, and I don't care how many points you score, he's going to score more.
All right, yeah. So I'm going to end this segment each time with a question, which is, if this is the AFC Championship game and it's Buffalo at Kansas City, what % chance would you give Buffalo of winning the game?
15.
Yeah, I would say about 20, so same area. But I think that's as high as we're going to get. So.
I'm a Debbie Downer on the Bills, and you're a Debbie Upper, or whatever you want to call yourself.
Yeah. All right. So to close out the podcast, we're going to run through the other games from this week like we always do, 3 at a time. I'll give a little comment on each, and then let Zach jump in on any comments he has in those games. So I want to start off with the Rams beating the Patriots 24-3. That happened last Thursday night. We recorded our preview episode before that game, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it. Wasn't much to talk about. Looks like kind of the end of the road for the Patriots. Just kind of interesting to remember when everybody was mad their team didn't sign Cam Newton. That's not looking like as smart a decision now as it did at the start of the season.
Still better than Brian Hoyer. I still feel strongly he's better than Brian Hoyer.
Yes. Yeah, and he looks better than Stidham as well, I think. Yeah. But the Titans beat the Jaguars 31-10. The Jaguars tank is in effect. It looks like it will not be enough to overtake the Jets, especially because my boy Gardner Minshew is going to be back in the lineup next week, so that'll be exciting. And the Bucs beat the Vikings 26-14. That's a big blow for the Vikings in their playoff race, largely due to my old friend Dan Bailey. I think the Bucs still look kind of so-so. I mean, they're getting it done. They're winning the games they need to win, but I would not exactly be hugely confident with them in a playoff matchup. So, yeah, thoughts on any of those games?
Yeah, I'll just take the last one. I mean, if the Vikings played well, they win that game. The Bucs did not play a good football game.
Yeah.
The defense was good, but Brady's got a lot left to be desired, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It just looks like kind of a hodgepodge team. It doesn't really have like one cohesive plan on either side of the ball.
It's Bruce Arians, and that big ego is just not helping any situation whatsoever. So
yeah,
they're going to be a popular upset pick in the first round, I think, in the playoffs. But they also, if they get hot, like who knows? So they're going to be tough to find out, I think, in the NFC.
All right, next group of games, we got the Broncos beating the Panthers 32-27. Good base of skill position players in Denver. I think they just got to find a quarterback, and they'll be in the playoff mix next year. The Bears destroyed the Texans 36-7. Guessing at this point, Romeo Crennel will not be back. It is the Texans defense, but Mitch Trubisky has looked pretty damn good the last couple of weeks. I think we can say he probably is a better option than Nick Foles. I'm not willing to go any further than that. And then the Colts beat the Raiders 44-27. It's a real uphill climb for the Raiders at this point. And the big story from this game for the Colts, I think, was Jonathan Taylor really coming on the scene and being the back that we expected out of him at the start of the season. So thoughts on those three?
I'd say pump the brakes on Trubisky, because if you're a Bears fan, you're absolutely terrified right now that they're going to try to extend him now that he's looked good against two just horrendous defenses.
They're still right in the playoff race.
Yeah, but they're not. They're not really. Yeah, so pumped brakes there. Texans are bad. God, please protect Deshaun Watson for a little while so we can get him out of Houston. Colts, I think it's very surprising how often they're scoring in the 30s and 40s when I look at box scores, and I just don't expect that whatsoever. Again, Phillip Rivers has been really good at protecting the football. And when he does so, their team plays very good. It's going to be a tough team to beat, I think, come playoff time. But then again, it is the Colts, and post Peyton Manning, they've been sort of letting people down. But the Raiders, I think, are in the same boat as the Dolphins, where they're kind of at the mercy of their schedule, but also polar opposites in that the Dolphins are flat out playing good football right now, and the Raiders are just backpedaling into the end of the season.
Yeah, for sure. So next set of games, the Seahawks beat the Jets 40-3. That is more like what we were looking to see out of the Jets. The Packers beat the Lions 31-24. The Lions are definitely looking more intense now. I think they've been energized by Matt Patricia being out of the building, but Rodgers just continues to check the boxes for the MVP. I think he's having his best season this year since 2011, that really great season. And the Chargers beat the Falcons 20-17. The Chargers somehow won a close game on a last-second field goal, even after once again screwing up the clock management at the end of the first half. So, two very cursed teams going against each other in that game, and one of them had to win it. So it ended up being the Chargers.
Yeah, the Atlanta social media team put out the Spider-Man, like the pointing at.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Very much the recipe for the Chargers to win a game is to play basically themselves and just wait for them to mess it up even more. That's ridiculous. Anthony Lynn takes over special teams and they have like the most pathetic botched like last second field goal
every week.
It's so bad, so bad. If you didn't watch it, they ran the ball again with no timeouts towards the end of the half. This time it wasn't the fourth quarter at least, but towards the end of the second quarter, and then. Half the offense believed that they were supposed to spike the ball, and the other half was running off the field while the kicking team was running on. And as then Justin Herbert just slowly walks off the field, knowing that they're not getting the field goal off. So absolutely pathetic. Anthony Lynn, thanks for coming. I know that you're very well respected, but your time here is done. Seahawks.
Be a great offensive coordinator somewhere.
The Seahawks, I thought for sure that they were going to find a way to make that one way too close, but they finally blew a team out. And then for the Packers, I feel like they skirt by without a lot of criticism for like not beating bad teams. And I know the Lions look a lot better and Stafford's played well, but like you can't be beating the Lions by 7 if you're supposed to be the 1 seed and a Super Bowl contender in the NFC. Like that game was way too close for comfort. And I know it's a division game; they're usually close. Like look at their schedule, and the Packers haven't really beaten bad teams the way that they should. And I know like we've argued that about some other teams. The Chiefs haven't really blown anybody out either. Seahawks always play a close game, but the Packers are right there too, and I feel like they're the only team that doesn't get criticism for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people I think the Packers have been sort of flying under the radar a little bit since that loss to Tampa Bay. That kind of convinced people that they were just not a contender, and now they're right back up to number 1 in the NFC. So maybe they'll be facing that closer scrutiny again at this point. But want to finish out with our NFC East slate here. Besides the Saints-Eagles game, which we already covered, the Cardinals beat the Giants 26-7. That was a very ugly game. I will never be betting on Daniel Jones again. And yeah, the Jason Garrett offense just keeps haunting the Giants here. Just not a lot of creativity. They had one huge 3rd and short play that they did this weird like 25-yard timing route. It's like that's your play on the biggest 3rd down of the game. But yeah, I'm sure you'll talk about that. The Cowboys, let's go Cowboys, beat the Bengals 30-7.
You said you were done with that. You said it was going to be a draft pick time now.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, but they're somehow not out of it here. And then we've got Washington beating the 49ers 23-15. This is your all alone in first place Washington football team. Their offense is really bad. I mean, maybe the worst in the division, but their defense is really, really good.
Second worst.
And yeah, Chase Young is an absolute monster. He's out there recovering fumbles, running him back for touchdowns, looking like a giant running back out there. So yeah, a lot to talk about with the NFC East. So any thoughts on those 3?
I'll start with Washington just because I was prepared to have to fight you to the death over this because I thought you were going to talk about like how much you thought they were great from that game, and then I was going to be
No,
like,
they weren't. Yeah,
they didn't score on offense. They did not score an offensive touchdown in that game and scored 23 points still. So yeah, Nick Mullins stinks. Like that's mostly why you're worried about your Wheel of Fortune pick, but he was horrendous in that game. Washington's defense is fantastic. There's no other way to say that. But the offense does need some help. Again, Alex Smith doesn't turn the ball over. And if you do that, you can win games scoring touchdowns on defense. Cowboys, I didn't feel like they looked as good as I was hoping, at least in the first half. The first half was sketchy for me. But then they kind of wore on Brandon Allen late. I hope you saw how truly bad that Bengals offense really is right now. Minus Joe Burrow. And then for the Giants, I won't say too much, but you nailed that 3rd and 1 play. This is probably the 4th or 5th time this year on a 3rd and 1 they've run that. And it's not been even remotely close to completed one single time. And the more important part of it is it was 2nd and 10 and Wayne Gallman just had run for 9 yards and like picked it up relatively easily. Like just give him the ball. He's running for 4 and 5 yards a carry. Stop it. Like your version of creativity is throwing deep on 3rd and 1. It's not cute. It's terrible. And that's a must-have first down. Like you don't get that first down, the game's over, and it was over. Also, this game reaffirmed everything I've believed with Daniel Jones since the day he stepped foot into the Meadowlands and was the starting quarterback of the Giants. If he cannot run the ball, if Daniel Jones cannot run the ball, not the Giants. If Daniel Jones does not run, he is not a good quarterback. His mobility is number one most important factor of him being a successful NFL quarterback. He apparently does not have much of a hamstring right now, and that killed him. If you're asking legit questions of should Colt McCoy have started that game, like you're not good, man. Like you got to figure it out because Colt McCoy is far from a starting quarterback in the NFL. And if that's the question you have after the game, we got a whole lot bigger issues than just figuring out the rest of the offense. So Jason Garrett's got to be gone. There's no excuses. And the Giants realistically should consider other quarterbacks for the near future, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems with the Giants offense, and it's not only Jason Garrett. I mean, he obviously hasn't had a ton to work with skill position-wise.
Also,
yeah, I mean, with Saquon going down early, did not help him. Yeah, go ahead.
Defensively, so I've been hyping up Patrick Graham. I was really disappointed in their defensive scheme in this game. They chose, instead of rushing Kyler, they chose to just rush 3 guys and, like, not really rush, just kind of, like, set an edge and, like, try to keep him in the pocket. He's way too good of a quarterback to just let him do whatever he wants in the pocket. Like, I get not wanting to run all over you, but you also got to try to touch him. Like, you have 2 defensive linemen getting double teamed that can't get by anybody, and, like, he's just sitting back there picking him apart. DeAndre Hopkins is going to get open at some point if you have 10 seconds to throw him the ball. So I was a little disappointed in that. I feel like it wasn't the best game plan. And now we have to worry about playing the Browns and the Ravens, who just put on the best offensive show I've ever seen in my life. So, yes, a lot of fun coming down the pipe for the Giants.
Yeah, that would be a fun primetime game on Sunday night. Giants-Browns could be a Colt McCoy revenge game if they end up picking him as the starter. But, yeah, that's all we have time for in this podcast. We will be back on Friday with our preview of Week 15 and possibly, if anything interesting happens, a recap of Thursday Night Football between the Raiders and the Chargers. So, yeah, that's all for this one. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. Give us a nice 5-star review, and we will be back on Friday.